Наши гости здесь сейчас научишься.
Да, почему? Почему сильно? Это много. Чахлость. Они не бросят. А почему они? Где вообще такой? Даже. Что ты делаешь? Его есть. Он что-то это не есть. Ему это нравится. Знаешь, что он есть? Тебе тоже нравится, что мне нравится. Может быть. Почему ты только с другого творчества? Мне кажется, это всегда посмотреть на голову. Очень сложно. Потому что просто несчастно.
Здравствуйте.
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 So where would you like us? Hang out over here?
Yeah, it's just somewhere here.
Sit down, sit here.
Afternoon, everyone.
Yes, first of all, Education USA welcomes our friends from the US Embassy, and we welcome all the attendees of this seminar about the student visa. So whenever you have any questions, our guests will be more than happy to give you any relevant answers, as well as we received the question online, just in future. So our guest today is Sam. Right?
Sam Rodenberg, yes.
Say Sam Rodenberg and
Alex Bella.
Alex Bell.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, let us greet them.
Okay, so we're here from US Embassy. Sorry we're a little bit late. We had a lot of visas to approve today. So I think we're going to do questions and answers first. And then, if we have things that we want to mention that you guys might miss at the end, we'll talk a little bit. So let's hear from you guys. What are your questions?
Maybe you could start with the list, so we can just like get it in there.
Question that you got online? Sure. Want to read it out?
Sure. So the first question is, while filling in the DS-160 form, the question, has anyone ever filed an immigrant petition on your behalf with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services section arose? So the person asking this question filled out a form for a diversity visa last October. And I think they're asking whether or not they need to list it on there. So yes, the question is basically, do they need to list having applied for a diversity visa through the lottery on the petition?
I don't believe they have to do that because it's not someone who is directly filing for an immigration benefit for them. That would be, for example, if you have your mother lives in the United States, or one of your parents got married and they're going to live in the United States and they want to bring you with them on the immigrant visa petition. I think that's when you would have to list that on the application. But if you apply for the diversity visa lottery, I don't think you'd have to mention that.
And just as a related question that we oftentimes get about whether or not applying for the diversity visa through the lottery affects your ability to get a non-immigrant visa, the answer is no. We don't take that into consideration when we're adjudicating. So please feel free to play the lottery as many times as you like.
So do you have a question?
That's the only question.
Okay. Other questions?
And obviously you can ask questions about the visa application process, studying in the United States. Sam and I both went to college and grad school in the United States. So we're happy to answer any sort of just general questions you might have about studying in the US. You're all in high school, correct? So you want to study in the US?
Yeah.
Okay.
So while you think about questions, I'll just mention a couple of things that you will need for the day of your interview. So first of all, of course, you have to go to ustraveldocs.com/RU, and that is where you fill out the application for the visa appointment and the actual visa application itself. So once you do that, you have to pay the fee, which is $160. And you also have to have an I-20 from your school, and that states that you are going to a particular school to study. It's an I-20, so it's immigration form, or whatever the I stands for, service 20, I-20. And that will list the name of your school, your name, what you're planning to study there. Are you going for 1 year of high school? Are you going for 4 years of college? Are you going for 2 years of graduate school? How much is the program going to cost? And how you're paying for it. So for example, if you're going to the University of Illinois and you're going there on a basketball scholarship, where they are paying for all of your studies because you're such a great basketball player, they want you to go there, it will say University Athletic Scholarship. So that when you speak to the officer, they'll know that you're going to school for free. However, if you're going to a university and it says the university costs $25,000 a year and the source of the funds is your family, then one of the things you'll need to bring with you is evidence to show how your family is going to pay for this year of your studies and how they'll be able to pay for the following years. For example, if your university cost is going to cost you $15,000 a year, you think about that $60,000 over the course of 4 years. So you have to demonstrate that your family already has the $15,000 ready, or you have a loan, or someone from your family is going to pay for it, and also that there's going to be a way for your family to pay for the school the next year, the year after that. Now there are, of course, scholarships and things like that. Education USA could help you out with that. Different universities have different scholarships and organizations, and I'm sure there are even some here in Russia that will provide you scholarships to study abroad. So that's something to think about. So you'll need to have the I-20, your application. You will have already paid the fee before you come to the appointment. Another thing that people often forget about is called the SEVIS, and that's actually like your student identity number for your time when you're studying in the United States. And all students in the United States need to have one of those. Sometimes people come to the interview, they have everything else, and they haven't done that. That's actually a separate registration process through, I believe, the Department of Homeland Security.
The Department of Homeland Security, but it's usually coordinated by the actual university or institution that you're studying at. So there will be a SEVIS coordinator at the institution of higher education.
And that's a separate fee. I don't remember exactly how much it is.
180 or 200.
Yeah, something like that. So you have to make sure you pay that fee as well. And usually you only have to pay that fee once if you maintain your education in one university for 4 years or 2 years, whatever it is. But that's also something you have to pay. And sometimes people come to the interview and they haven't paid that fee. So if everything is fine, we still can't issue the visa until you pay for the fee and it shows up in the system. So that doesn't mean that you have to come back a second time, but it's just something that can slow down your application. And one good thing is if you're going to study in the United States for 2 years or for 4 years, the visas are only good for 1 year for Russian students. That's according to the agreements we have with the Russian government and the United States government. But when you come home for vacation, you can apply by mail if you're going to the same school and everything is fine. You can send in all your documents to reapply by mail. So I know just now I had a whole big pack of applications for people who are going back to study in university for a second, third, fourth year. All their documents are fine. They were studying. They did everything they were supposed to do. Everything was in order, so they just did the application by mail. So they didn't have to come in for an interview a second time. So that's something to remember, because we do want you to come home. We want you to be able to go on vacation and see your family and see your friends. And we want to make it easier for you to get the next visa, because not everybody lives in Moscow or St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, or Vladivostok, where we have the embassy and the consulates. So if you live someplace far away, we don't want to have you always have to travel to the embassy or the consulate for another interview.
And I guess I'll just kind of dovetail a little bit, although if anyone has any questions, just shoot up your hand, please.
So I was thinking of one major, and this major listed on the I-20, but then I changed it, and so now it's like another major listed on the website and in my profile, but it's still the first one in the I-20. Should I do something about it, or it's just fine?
I don't think that's a problem, especially for undergraduate studies. You could just mention that to the officer at the interview, and probably the next year when you have the new I-20, it'll say that. But that happens especially in undergraduate. We don't require in the United States the way they do in Russia and a lot of countries like in Europe, where you have to choose a major before you get to school. For the United States, it's normal that you come to school your first year and you don't know what your major is going to be. So it's totally understandable. I changed my major while I was in college. You might have done the same thing.
Yeah, I think
it happens all the time.
Usually sometime around your third year, you might think you have a major, maybe. People take their time. One thing though that may affect the visa process if you're reapplying is if you're transferring schools. One of the great things about the United States is actually the universities make it very easy to transfer schools if you want to find a better fit or if you're looking to see a different environment. But sometimes if that is happening, we'll ask you to come in for another interview just so we can make sure that everything's okay if you're doing that. I'm sorry, you had a question?
I'm not really a Russian citizen, and for how many years will my visa last?
It depends on your citizenship. So
I'm from Vietnam.
Vietnam. Okay. I believe Vietnam student visas are 5 years, but I don't want to say with absolute certainty. But the last I checked, that was the case.
I'm from Uzbekistan, and my question also like what about Uzbekistan citizens?
Top of my head.
I believe it. So.
But I'm studying here as a Russian student.
I understand. The issue is that it depends on your citizenship because the United States, basically, we try to offer the same validity for visas as is offered by your home country to American citizens who want to go to Uzbekistan or to Vietnam to study. So I think Sam and I aren't going to be able to provide the exact year, but I do think it changed recently for Uzbekistan, so it may be higher, but I don't want to.
It's online. You can find it.
You can
Reciprocity
find
schedule.
information online. So, for example, a regular tourist visa for a Russian citizen
Yes,
is 3 years. For Uzbek citizens, it's going to be different. That's just the way it is because of the different agreements. It's called reciprocity. So we try to do the same thing as Alex was saying, as the host government does for our citizens, and it might be different.
I guess a related question, you are allowed to apply here in Moscow, even if you aren't a Russian citizen, of course. So you're welcome to come to the embassy.
Other questions?
Well, I have not exactly this topic, but if there is a possibility to study abroad, like not in my country, what happens to my visa if I go to another country for a semester or half a semester?
So, I mean, right now we would be issuing you, if you were in a full-time program in the United States, we'd be issuing a full-year visa, and it would be multiple entry. So you would be free to exit and enter the United States as many times as you liked. So the process of actually getting the visa to whatever third country you wanted to study in would have to be through you and your school, but it shouldn't affect your validity as a student. And when I was in college, I studied in China several times. And there were many students who weren't Americans who were from other countries who also studied with me at that time. That didn't affect them at all.
I don't know whether this question is really already asked, but are we allowed to work during the actual studies during summer and for how many hours? Or it depends on the university policy?
That's a good question. I think you are allowed to work while you're on a student visa. If I remember correctly, now again, I'm not 100% positive, but I believe it's a maximum of 20 hours, which is the same as it would be, I believe, for American students. That's because they want to make sure the focus of your time is on your studies, not on work. And I believe that if you're on a student visa, you're allowed to have an internship during the summer, as long as it's something like connected to your school and things like that. So you're still a student, even if you were doing an internship in the United States.
Right. Just remember that the primary purpose of your stay in the United States needs to be studying. You can't just nominally be there studying, but they're working. that could affect your visa in the future. There's also an opportunity called on-the-job training for the year after you graduate from university, and that in that case you would be working full-time for a salary in the field, but that's something that you would arrange through your university and through DHS for your SEVA status. But we see that oftentimes too. The students go 4 years in the United States, they finish a degree, and they want to find an opportunity to kind of practice some of their skills in the United States, and they're more than welcome to do that.
For how long after my education finishes can I stay in the United States on the visa?
So, you mean after you've graduated?
Yeah,
correct?
after.
So I think it's a month, unless you're doing, like I just said, the program that I just described, the on-the-job training, in which case you can stay for up to another year for that program. You're also, of course, free to come back and apply for a tourist visa, and that would allow you to travel as many times as you like in a 3-year period.
Another thing to remember is your visa is also good for 30 days before your program starts. So I know that sometimes students think, well, school starts on September 1st. Does that mean I'm only allowed to travel to America on September 1st? No. You're allowed to go there. If they tell you school starts September 1st, but there's going to be a student orientation on August 25th, and you're allowed to move into your dorm on August 21st, that's fine. You're allowed to come to the United States 30 days before to get all your affairs in order. So I know sometimes what students will do is their parents will travel with them, maybe 2 weeks beforehand. They might travel a little bit in the city or around where they're going to be living. They'll make sure their kids are settled into the dorms or the apartment where they're going to live. And then you have time to do your orientation, to get your books for school, because a lot of times you will do that before school starts. So that's important to remember, 30 days before your school starts, and you can stay 30 days after your school is over.
The other thing is oftentimes students who are studying in the United States will also have a tourist visa. You're allowed to have both visas at the same time, especially if they were going to the United States to travel around to different universities to see which one they wanted to attend. Oftentimes you can actually enter a few months before school on that visa, take care of whatever you're needing to take care of. And as long as you re-enter the country on their student visa or adjust status, then you can do that as well.
Can I update my visa from the United States when it's over?
Unfortunately, no. For student visas, no. But when you are allowed into the country on an F visa, you're admitted what's called duration of status. So basically, so long as you're in the United States and you're still a valid student with active status, still studying at your program, you don't need to have a visa that's active to be there. So say your visa expires in May in your sophomore year, your second year of college, and you don't want to go home for the summer. You want to stay and travel or do whatever else it is you're going to do in the US. You can actually stay on that visa and then start the next year. And even though your visa's expired, you're still a valid student, that's okay. The problem is that the moment you leave, you'll need a new visa. So if you want to go home for Christmas vacation or something, you'll have to apply for a visa at that time.
And that's something to think about for your planning, because obviously when there are big vacations, not only schools are closed, but also things like the embassy. So for example, the Russian holidays were closed for those, whatever it is, 10 days here in the United States. For the Russian holidays were closed here in Russia. So if you come home for winter vacation and then you apply to the embassy to get your new visa, you might not get your visa in time to go back to school. So it's one thing that's important to find out: how much vacation do I have? Will I have enough time to get my new visa ready? Because it usually takes a week or two if you're going to reapply for a new visa. So it's something to think about, which is part of the reason why it's usually best when people come home, there's a long break, either if your school gives you like 3 weeks or a month for the winter vacation, or if you have like the 2 or 3 months for the summer vacation. Those are the best times to reapply for your visa. And there also have been cases where people have left the United States and they've gone to Canada or Mexico because they want to go there, and they had to reapply for a visa there. So it is possible to do that, but it's not the best situation, because when we're looking at people who are applying for a visa, we're looking at their ties. We're looking at what are their connections to this country where they're applying for a visa. Now, if you're Russian and you're applying in Russia, it makes sense. If you're Uzbek and you live in Russia, or you're Vietnamese, you live in Russia, and you're studying here, your family lives here, it makes sense. Now, if you go to Canada on spring break and your visa expires, For the Canadian, for the officer in our embassy in Canada, it might be difficult to decide whether or not you're a valid student, whether or not you're doing the right thing. So that's why we usually recommend that people reapply for their visas in their home country, where they actually usually live. Question?
Yes, as we know that this process is very difficult to take the student's visa. Sometimes the consul not allow to take a visa. Can you tell me about these cases when he can let to not allow to take a visa?
So you mean in cases where
Yes.
people's visa is refused at the interview?
Yes.
Okay. So Sam just spoke a little bit about that. For students, one of the key things is if you're going there to be a university student, you're going to need to be able to demonstrate that you have enough English to succeed. You're also, I mean, of course, you can go for a period of intensive English beforehand. Many universities will do kind of conditional admittance where they let you in after you conduct 6 months of English as a second language or whatever. In those cases, the bar for English isn't going to necessarily be as high, but you're still going to want to be able to show the consular officer that you have enough English that you're going to be able to succeed in the United States. Because we're issuing you a student visa to go study, and if we don't think that you'll be able to, then it may be more difficult for us to approve your visa. The other aspect is, as Sam was talking about, basically having enough ties to someplace outside of the United States. It doesn't necessarily have to be the country where you're living. That we can be sure that you're intending to go to the United States, travel, study, or do whatever it is that you want to do, and eventually return home. The other thing to note is that sometimes if you are refused, you have a right to apply again. But at that time, at the window, you won't be able to appeal that decision. So my recommendation would be to use your English. You all are understanding us, even though we're speaking on pretty difficult topics here, no problem. So I'm sure that would not be a concern for you. So just make sure that you, in the interview, kind of use as much English as possible to show your abilities.
And also, it's a bit of a myth that it's very difficult to get a visa to the United States. Here in Russia, for example, we approve the vast majority of all the visas when people apply. I can't give you a percentage, but it's very high. And for the student visas, we approve the vast majority because usually if you've taken the trouble to look at schools, apply to schools, find a school that's going to accept you, figure out how your family is going to pay for it, practice your English for years and years in school. In some cases, people have studied English outside of school to get better at English. Generally speaking, you're going to be able to convince us that you're a credible student. There are cases where people do not do that. And if we think that the person is not actually going to study, if we think maybe they're going to the United States to work and just pretend like they're going to study, or if they're just looking for a way to live in the United States illegally and maybe they never plan to go to school at all, if we have these kinds of suspicions, we're not going to approve the visa. But if we think that you're a student, we think that you are credible, you want to be, whatever, you want to be a veterinarian, you want to go study veterinary medicine at this university, and you're credible and your family has been saving money and your grandfather's going to help pay for it, and your uncle's going to help pay for it, and you're going to get a job during the summertime to help pay for it. If it makes sense, then we can approve your visa. If it seems like you're not really going to study, that might be a time when you don't get a visa. Or as my colleague mentioned, if you come to the window and you can't answer basic questions in English, how are you going to understand a university lecture on astrophysics? It's going to be difficult.
Do any certificates like TOEFL or IELTS help? Like if I bring them with me, or it doesn't matter?
You can bring them. Most importantly, you should bring them in your brain.
Okay.
Prepare. And most importantly, you should have done a good job taking those courses to prepare you for stuff.
So we should expect any tricky questions during the visa procedure?
Yes, my last interview on Friday, I asked, there are two people. One of them is leaving Chicago on a train that is traveling at 50 miles per hour. The second one is leaving from New York on a plane, traveling at 500 miles per hour. At what point will they meet in Miami? Do you guys know?
Never.
On vacation.
We don't ask too many tricky questions.
We'll talk about your coursework. If you can talk about stuff that you should be expected to know about as someone who is interested in studying in the United States and who's studied English for a while. Then we'll understand. And I would say a basic rule is we also remember how difficult it can be to answer trick questions in Russian too. So you try to avoid that as well.
And does my undecided status about my major affect my thesis decision?
I mean, you know, I will frequently ask students about what they want to study or what they're interested in studying. And that's because I want to hear them talk about their interests and to kind of use some of their language abilities. But it's not because I'm going to approve all the mathematicians and the scientists and all the people who are going to go study, you know, Hemingway are going to be refused. No, you're free to study whatever you like in the United States. It's one of the great things about the university system there.
Is there any prejudice against particular fields of study or particular schools? What I mean by that, if an individual is applying for a visa and would like to study law, obviously he or she cannot apply that particular knowledge back in his or her home country. Or an individual from a small African country is applying to study nuclear physics. Or in those cases, like language schools, do you have any prejudice, or do you factor the nature of the study in your decision? What they're studying? I would say as a general rule, not really. I issue lawyers all the time, and there are a lot of English fluent, very, very qualified lawyers here in Russia who have studied law in the United States, either because they're practicing international law of some variety or because they're just interested in the topic matter. So I've seen that a lot. Also, obviously, there's a lot of Russians who work for large international corporations here in Russia. And also often they would like to study in the United States as well. In terms of, you know, the nuclear physics studying a small African student, there's tons of nuclear power plants all over the world. I believe Russia is setting them up all over South America and elsewhere. So there's plenty of opportunity to work. And the other thing too is, you know, I want to address kind of this long-term intent. Maybe someday you want to apply for the diversity visa and move to the United States to work. You're allowed to do that, and we encourage it. That's why we have the program. But until that day, say you just want to study for 4 years in the United States and then return to Russia for 2 years to do whatever you want. We're going to look at that situation. We're going to say, just because you might someday, 10 years, 15 years from now, be interested in moving to the United States doesn't mean that I'm not going to issue you a visa to go as a student now. That's not what we're interested in doing, because we want you to come to the United States. We want you to study with us. And especially in terms of subject matter at the undergraduate level, it typically doesn't matter too much in our decision, just because, as Sam said, you're likely to change your mind 5 times while you're there anyways. So.
And about the question about studying English, I would say that is also something that we see a lot of. And of course, if you're going to study English, we won't expect you to speak English as fluently as if you're going to study in university. However, generally speaking, we expect that you have some level of English to show that you've already started practicing. And sometimes we will issue those visas for less than a full year, because if you tell me that you're going to study English for 2 weeks, I might not issue you a full year visa. I might only issue you a couple of months visa or a month visa to do the program that you're going on, just because this is what typically happens with our students who come to Russia for a short period of time. And also because we feel like if you're telling us you're only going for this period of time, then we'll probably limit this visa to that period of time. But if you're going to study English for 6 months or a year, then you would probably get a full year visa. And of course, it's more typical that people who study English for a shorter period of time, like during their summer vacation. We see a lot of students go do that. And then that's only if you're going to be studying full time. Because another thing is, if you're on a tourist visa, you're allowed to study in the United States for up to 18 hours per week, as long as the English study is not the main thing you'll be doing. So a lot of times we'll have students who are in high school and college, they have tourist visas, and they want to go to the United States to study English, but they're also going to be going there for fun. So they might go visit their, their friend that they met, online, or their friend that they met from camp or whatever it is. And then they also want to study English like 2 days a week and just practice their English so their English gets better. And the other 3 or 4 days a week, they're just having fun, going to the beach, going to the amusement park, whatever it is. That's also fine with tourist visa, as long as the amount of study is less than 18 hours or less per week. Other questions? We'll take questions from parents too. In Russian or in English. Даже по-русски можно.
Много вопросов.
Даже по-русски можно спрашивать.
Нет, просто, может быть, на часть вопросов уже получены ответы. Я не так хорошо знаю.
Ничего страшного, спрашивайте.
Что ты имеешь в виду под финансовой собственностью документов?
Спросите просто.
У меня вопрос очень простой. Мы придем на собеседование, у нас назначено уже собеседование на июнь месяц. Вот. И, как вы говорили, необходимо показать возможность оплатить обучение. Вот у нас прямо сейчас живых денег, да, на счету лежит не на все 4 года, да, а меньше, на 2 года есть. У нас есть там собственность различная, да, там как-то работаем. Каким образом вот во время собеседования продемонстрировать, что, так сказать, есть возможность, и мы там примем все необходимые меры, там, решения для того, чтобы профинансировать обучение. Ну, кроме тех кэш, который лежит там в банке сейчас.
Ну, в принципе, мы обычно хотим видеть минимум, что у вас есть деньги, собственно, чтобы заплатить за 1 год, первый год обучения. И то, что вы можете принести с собой, это такие документы, например, то, что вы уже сделали оплату для частного университета. Очень часто они требуют, чтобы вы заплатили там 10%, 20% заранее. Даже до сих пор, что дети еще приехали, до сих пор, что уже вещи собрали, до сих пор, что подавали на визу. Они хотят свои деньги, депозит сразу, чтобы держать место, потому что они принимают ограниченное количество сумм.
У нас там что-то попросили, нужно заплатить.
Вот, так, например, документ, что вы уже заплатили там $2000, $3000, что там не было, это одно. Деньги, которые у вас есть в банке, письма от ваших работодателей, что вы там получаете какую-то зарплату месячную, и какая у вас должность, чтобы мы видели, что хорошо, у вас есть какие-то деньги уже выкладаны на счету, но вы еще работаете в какой-то должности, где вы будете получать какое-то количество денег, мы можем подумать в голове.
Ну, у меня, например, конкретная ситуация, там, у меня там может быть оклад там не очень большой, я продаю, поэтому у меня есть договор, в котором у меня написано, что там какой-то процент от сделок и бла-бла-бла. Это, конечно, не оклад.
Ну, понятно, мы понимаем, что здесь есть много
клиентов, я пишу.
Да, это вы можете действительно такие договоры, какие у вас собственности.
То есть
это тоже можно включать. И, например, очень часто бывает, что родители сами не будут оплачивать, а там дядя, тетя, дедушка, бабушка, старшая сестра, кто-то помогает с деньгами, чтобы оплачивать учебу. Тоже можно от них представлять документы, что это сестра, та же самая фамилия, она написала письмо, и вот у нее документ, что у нее там есть на счету какое-то количество денег, и она готова заплатить за половину стоимости обучения дочки или сестры, или внучки, кто бы там ни был. Это вообще может приносить на собеседование, и я еще хотел сказать, что почему что родители имеют право проводить с своими детьми, особенно когда они несовершеннолетние, и даже если им там 18 лет, можно прийти с ними на собеседование тоже, и обычно пропускают.
И самое важное просто, чтобы консул верить, что у вас есть такая способность платить, и нет никаких конкретных условий, которые вам обязательно покажут. Просто вообще.
Насколько я знаю, нужно доказать, что действительно вы сможете получить эту визу, что вы достойны и все такое. Вот я хотела получить в дальнейшем на журналистическое направление. У меня есть кое-какие статьи, и насколько полезно будет показать эти статьи консулу во время собеседования или кому.
Right. Obviously, this would show that you're a credible student because you're doing that sort of research. Truth be told, I don't think you want to wait half an hour while we read your article at the interview.
It will be useful or not. I just wanted to know.
I think more useful would be to be able to talk about your research. Because, as I said, I'm probably not going to read through the whole thing, but I may ask you, what sort of research have you done? What are your interests? And if you can talk about that. Again, remember, if you can convince me that you're a student and you've got the English ability, and I believe you're going to be able to pay for it, then I'm going to trust you on that. I'm not going to demand that you have written 5 articles for the 3 biggest journals out there.
Thank you.
And something important to remember, you're going to read on the website, you're going to talk to your friends, and you're going to bring like a whole book bag with documents. You're going to show up to our windows and we're going to say, here are all my papers. And I might talk to you for 2 minutes and I might look at this paper and this paper and say, okay, we're also going to say, but don't you want to look at all these documents that I have? I might not need everything. So, it's better for you to come with whatever you think is what you need to show us, but don't be surprised if we don't look at everything. Like if you show me the one bank account says your mom and dad have enough money to pay for school for this year, and then you say, and I have like 20 more documents saying you have a car, and a dog, and a house, and my grandma wants me to come home, and here's a picture of my whole family, and like my best friend would be very upset if I go to America and never come back, and I have this letter from him saying I will come back for summer vacation. It's nice, but I don't need to see all those documents. So, bring whatever you think you need. Be prepared to talk to us. But don't be surprised if we say we don't want to see everything. And know what you're bringing with you, because sometimes people come and they just say, I just have 1 million papers. You look at them and tell me what you want. And if that happens, we might say, I'm going to give you these papers back. You go sit down. You find these 3 things that I need, and then I will call you back. And you're going to be nervous that day, probably. You might get upset. So it's just good to know. Be prepared. Know what you have with you, because I don't want you to come to my window and start crying because I need you to give me the piece of paper that shows your dad and your mom have a job and you can't find them. So, know what you have, be organized, and just come ready.
It will be more, it will be more useful if I tell about my mistakes by my tail.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And also just remember, so say that there was some document that we did need and you forgot it. We're not going to just deny your visa right there, okay? And we're not going to make you come back, most likely, again. You can usually mail it in after the interview or just send us an email with it scanned or something like that. So don't fear that if you don't bring everything right away, that this will be the end. That's not the case, at least on our end.
Yeah, we're usually pretty nice.
Try to be. And that's the other thing. So say that, you all are fantastic English. You're having no problems understanding and asking questions. But say that you get there and you're like, oh, I'm so nervous for this interview, and you just forget English, right?
Yes.
It can happen, right? I know. If you don't understand a question, the best thing you can do is say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. Could you repeat it? Don't just try to guess. Like if you just try to guess and you start going down some random road, then we're going to think that you didn't understand us. So just feel free to ask for clarification. Say, I'm nervous, please.
Yes, we're human, we can
Right. Yeah, well, the officer interviewing you is human too, I
Yes.
promise.
Other questions?
Пожалуйста.
Пока все молчат. Чего не надо говорить на собеседовании?
Я хочу жить постоянно в США. Да.
No, нет такое. Люди приходят иногда, приходят на туристическую визу, мне говорят, я вынужден ехать в Америку, хотя мне не нравятся американцы, я не люблю Америку, у меня нет никаких идей там жить. Это не особенно нужно нам рассказать, но даже в таких случаях мы можем одобрить визу. Я не знаю, если есть такое, что не нужно говорить на собеседование, просто нужно быть готовым отвечать на вопросы офицера и быть готовым объяснять, почему вы едете в Соединенные Штаты. Это главный вопрос всегда, когда нам приходит на собеседование, либо туристическую визу, рабочую визу, студенческую визу, неважно. Это самое главное.
Does the way of me choosing university matter? Like how I choose it, why, what are the reasons for this particular school, or it's not that important?
We'll ask about it, yeah. I've asked why you chose to attend this school, and if you chose it because it's the best veterinary school in the United States and you want to be a veterinarian, then that makes sense. But if you say you want to go to the best veterinarian school because they've got really great, hot dogs there. That's not going to make any sense, and it's not going to make you sound like the most credible student. But I mean, again, there are all sorts of different universities, colleges, technical programs, 2-year community colleges in the United States, and that's kind of one of the great things, as I've said before, about our system. And we encourage you to try out whichever program is going to be best for you. I've met many Russian students who've gone for 2 years to a community college, decided that they wanted to complete a 4-year degree, and they've transferred to one of our public schools or one of the 4-year schools, and that's perfectly acceptable. And you can even come up to me the first year and say, I'm going to go to this 2-year school, but my intent is at the end of 2 years to transfer, and that's totally okay. And if you can explain why you want to do that, then that's perfectly acceptable. Please.
Anybody else have any questions before we go back to this one?
How long does the interview usually take?
For students, 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, 3 to 5 minutes.
Oh, it's not that long.
It's not that long. You'll spend more time hanging out in the embassy than you will
Yeah,
talking
I
to us for
remember.
just the interview.
Get as nervous as you can.
We have a bathroom. We have snack machines. If you want to buy yourself some cookies or soda.
Yeah.
So in case you're there for a little while, you know, there's something to do. And there's a video playing about the United States. You can see different places.
It's like such a long.
It's not that boring.
Yeah. Then those who saw it already, they will be, oh, I've seen that. It's good, but it's like 2 or 3 times seen it.
I think the goal is for you to be out of the embassy before you watch the whole video. we don't always make it that far.
We try. There are a lot of Russians who want to go to the United States. So we're trying our best.
And one more question I didn't really understand. What is considered to be the start of the studies? So my university starts 1st of October, but there is the orientation session on 15th of December of September. Yeah, then there is the pre-orientation for international student on the 10th of September. So what is considered at the start?
The start is probably going to be when you start actual classes. So they say it's October 1st, and it's October 1st.
Okay.
But you are allowed to travel 30 days before the education starts. So if you have to go to orientation, you have to find your apartment or your dorm and get settled in, that's all allowed before you're in the first 30 days before you start school. And schools are smart about that. They usually start things a week, 2 weeks before school starts so that you have time to get there and get ready. And also they know with visas, this is the rule, that it's 30 days before, so they don't want you to have a problem with your visa. So if school starts October 1st, you're allowed to travel on September 1st, September 2nd, September 8th, that's fine. So you can get to school, go to your orientation, we want you to have orientation, we want you to get settled in, we want you to have a good school year, have good grades, go home, tell your friends, tell your family, and then come back and do it again.
And I was going to say, it also reminds me that, of course, when you enter the United States, there's going to be a border security policeman or woman who's going to also ask you why you're going to the United States. It's important at that time when you enter that you have that I-20 with you, because if you don't, then it can cause you some issues at the border. So once your visa is approved, we'll just hand that back to you and we'll say, don't lose this, it's very important. So. But yeah, another question.
Yeah, another question is the change of status process like really hard? Like how much time does it usually take? Is it worse, for example, coming on, for example, 20th of August and on the tourist visa and then changing it, or is it that hard that I'd better not bother with it? So how hard is it? And they change your status.
I mean, the truth is the issues of status when you're in the United States are all dealt with by the Department of Homeland Security. So they're not our immediate responsibility. So I don't know the answer to your immediate question on as to how long it would take. I mean, the easiest way would be to go see Niagara Falls and just re-enter on your F visa, and then you can also see Canada for a few minutes. But if you have a Canadian visa, yes. I mean, I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but I'm sure that DHS would be able to answer it if you contact them.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, probably the best thing is just enter within the dates that we're telling you,
Right.
because if you go for like an extra week or two, it's probably not worth the hassle and the paperwork to figure it out and to do it. Now, if, for example, what happens sometimes is some universities, they won't have a campus. So, or they will allow you to live in an apartment off campus. What you might do is you might go in June for 2 weeks, decide where you're gonna live, rent an apartment, and then have everything taken care of, go back to Russia, stay there for a month or two, get your things in order, pack your stuff, and then come back and start as a student.
Right.
That's an easy way to do it. So you go in as a tourist the first time, you prepare everything, just like a lot of times people will travel to the United States as tourists to visit universities and decide where they want to study. Then you go home, you get your things ready, then you come back to the United States as a student with your student visa, and you start your studies. It's usually a lot easier that way.
And do you immediately say that you approved or didn't approve visa after the interview?
The vast majority of the time, yes. There will be an immediate decision at the window. And the only times where that won't be the case is, as I mentioned earlier, say you forgot some document that we needed to see. In that case, basically what we'll do is just put a hold on your case. And then once we receive that information, then we'll make a decision at that time. But you should know the vast majority of the time the result right away.
And we're also, just so you guys know, we're not allowed to issue a student visa more than 120 days in advance of the start of your program. So if your school starts on September 1st, you can apply 4 months before that, which is, I believe, May 1st. So if you come to us in February and you say, I'm going to study in America, and we say, great, when does your program start? September. Then we can have the interview and we'll do everything, but we won't actually issue the visa until May, because those are one of the rules that we have. So that's something to keep in mind. So you want to apply early to make sure in case any problem, you forgot some piece of paper, you have time to send in the documents, but don't apply way too early. And with our appointment system, you can schedule your appointment well in advance. So if in February you find out, I'm going to Harvard, I start in September, I'm excited, you can go online, fill out the whole application, and set your appointment for May or for June, whenever is convenient for you. So you don't have to apply for an appointment next week or tomorrow. You can apply for an appointment when it works for you. So we try to make things simple for people so it's convenient. And we don't want you to miss school either. So if you can come into an appointment after your school is over for high school, or on a day that you have vacation, or maybe our embassy is open, that's something you can do. So we allow you to schedule in advance. Yes. Yes, what's the problem?
Could you tell more about your program if it's possible?
The Global Undergraduate Program?
Yes.
Okay, this is one of many programs that is run by the Department of State, where we actually will give scholarships for students to study in the United States. I believe, if I'm not wrong, the Global Undergraduate Program will pay for you to go for 1 year in the United States?
2 years, 1 semester assignment.
Was there a semester? Yeah, so it's not for your full 4 years, but it's for a short period of time in the United States. And the reason why we have all these programs where the Department of State and the U.S. government will pay for students from other countries and professionals from other countries to come to the United States and study and have exchanges actually goes back to Senator Fulbright. Back in, I believe it was around 1914 or 1915, he was actually a student, an exchange student in England. And he went there on a scholarship from an English university. And he thought it was such a great experience for him because he left the United States, he went to another country, he studied there, he met English people, he made friends forever. He had different experience and a different view of the world. And when eventually he became a senator, he thought the United States should do the same thing. So he pushed for the United States to pay for programs where we will bring foreigners to the United States to study, and we'll also send Americans from the United States to other countries so that we can all meet each other, have different experiences, meet people from other cultures, because there's nothing like face-to-face connections with actual people. It's one thing to read about the United States in the news. It's one thing to watch a movie about the United States. It's a totally different thing to go live in the United States for 6 months or a year or 2 years and actually meet real people. The same thing for Americans going to other countries. And actually, what you might not realize is it's even better for us as a deal than it is for you guys. Because while you might come from Russia or Uzbekistan or Vietnam to the United States and meet like 1,000 Americans, that's 1,000 Americans that met someone from Russia or Vietnam or the United States without having to travel there. It's much cheaper to send one Russian to America than 1,000 Americans to Russia. So it works for us very well too, because some Americans have never met a Russian person or a Vietnamese person or an Uzbek person or an Egyptian person or a South African person. So the nice thing is when people from all over the world come together, we realize we have a lot in common. We realize there are a lot of things that we can discuss. And even when we disagree about things, we can do so in a civil way. And actually, my last job, I worked with programs like this in Guatemala. And one of the students that I work with from Guatemala, his best friend is an Egyptian boy who he met on an American program where kids from all over the world went to the United States, and they met other students who were studying English. It's actually called the Access program, which exists here in Russia as well. And they met friends from all over the world. So now this Guatemalan boy, his best friend is from Egypt, his other best friend is from El Salvador, and he has another good friend from Morocco. So countries where they might never see each other, they might never have met someone from that country, they met in the United States. So one of the great things about programs like Global Undergraduate and the Fulbright program and many other programs that the State Department has is that we will bring people from all over the world together. And many other countries have similar programs, not usually on the same large scale as we do, but it's also something to look at. And there's Education USA, which is focused on programs in the United States, of course. But the English, they do some programs that are similar. The French, the Canadians, many other countries have programs where they will bring students from other countries to their country. I know Russia and the Soviet Union have been doing that for a long time as well. And also even where their government will pay for their own students to leave to go study somewhere else, because it's a very useful experience to go somewhere else, have other professors, other knowledge, and also meet other people.
You had a question earlier?
Yeah, or the ground, but how long does it take after the visa is issued to actually put it into the passport? So how long will I,
3 hours.
Oh, so it's not that long.
Sometimes it can take longer. Unfortunately, we don't always have control over that. But I think our typical time to get it back to you, if you live in Moscow, is 2 to 3 work days. And if you live outside of Moscow, it can be a few more days than that. But keep in mind that that's us trying our best to provide good customer service. You don't want to come in 2 days before your flight, because if something goes wrong, then there's oftentimes not anything that we can do. So you want to plan ahead in case of the worst, but hopefully we'll get it right back to you.
Скажите, а родителям потом тоже учебную визу получать или туристической достаточно?
Нет, родители, если хотят ехать в гости к детям, они только могут получать туристическую визу.
Это вот я так поняла, что если есть туристическая, все равно нужно будет учебную оформлять, да?
Нет,
у ребенка, если есть.
Но у ребенка, если ребенок будет учиться на полную ставку, тогда им нужно будет студенческую визу. А если ребенок только едет, там, например, на лето...
Нет. Вот если есть туристическая уже, то есть все равно, если он собирается поступать, ему обязательно надо будет еще одна.
Обязательно, да. Я объяснял раньше, что если, например, вы хотите посылать там в лагерь, это может делать туристическую визу. Или если он будет приезжать там в Америку там, на несколько недель, чтобы учить английский язык, скажем, там 15, там, максимум 18 часов в неделю, тогда тоже можно сделать туристическую визу. А если там на университет или на высшую школу на полную ставку, тогда уже студенческая виза нужна.
Просто получается, что когда виза будет заканчиваться, туристическая, там, через, допустим, 1,5 года поступать, то есть нам какую? Нам все равно сначала туристическую, наверное, надо будет продлять?
Не обязательно.
Или сразу же уже делать?
Если он едет только учиться, ему не нужна туристическая виза в то время. Так он может просто подавать на студенческую визу, не тратить лишние $160 на туристическую визу, если он не будет ехать как турист. И это вообще хороший вопрос. Дети, которые едут учиться, они с собой родители не могут привозить с собой. Но если взрослые будут ехать учиться, например, если вы решили, что вы хотите ехать на летнюю сессию, учить английский язык на 3 недели, вы, да, можете привозить с собой ваши дети на это время. Особенно, когда дети там маленькие, это очень часто бывает, что люди приезжают там учить там где-то какой-то мастер, например, MBA, что такого, они могут привозить с собой своих детей. это есть план. А дети своих родителей от студенческой визы не имеют права привозить.
А если я еду учиться на 3 недели, 20 часов курс, ну, как неделю, это уже туристическая виза?
Это уже рабочая, это уже студенческая виза. Максимум 18 часов.
Какой сбор называется туристическая виза? Консульский сбор.
За туристическую визу?
Нет, за студенческую визу.
Каждый то же самое. Same price, right? $160.
For the work visas can cost more, but that's.
У нас визы еще действующие, но еще года 2 будет действующие.
Если я могу изучить туристическое,
Так и так.
Да, можно
действует.
можно иметь действующие, что у вас будет действующая туристическая виза и действующая
У
студенческая
нас действующая туристическая в старом паспорте, а сейчас специально новый оформили паспорт, чтобы он был там на 10 лет, и туда сейчас будет ставиться виза студенческая. А как стоит быть? Она будет перенесена или как?
Нет, мы не переносим старый виз в новый паспорт. Ну, у нас такое правило, если у вас виза в паспорте, который не действует, вы можете путешествовать с этой визой в старом паспорте вместе с новым паспортом. Это разрешается. У нас такое правило.
How long should be the expiration date from the date the visa is issued? For example, my passport is gonna expire in a half a year, approximately more than that, on the new year approximately. And should I get a new one before applying for a visa, or is it okay? Because there is some of vicious circle there in my situation that like in both directions. I need a visa to apply for a passport and a passport. So what should be the length? How long? For how long?
So I think Sam was just talking about this a bit, but we don't have any restriction on putting in a visa because you're allowed to travel on your passport regardless of how close to expiring it is. And even once the passport itself has expired, if that visa is still active, you can travel with it as long as you go with your new passport. I know that many countries in Europe, Russia as well, require you to have one that's has at least 6 months validity, but we don't have that same requirement.
So if you have time to get the new passport, it's going to be easier for you. Because you'll just get a new passport, put a visa in there, and don't worry about it. If you don't have time, you want to get the visa first, then you'll be carrying one of the two passports.
So keep in mind, if you go to the United States with an expired passport, and you're not going to have a passport to leave the United States, that could be problematic because then you'd have to deal with the Russian embassy in DC, and it may be more difficult to get a passport there than it was to get a visa from us. But,
Not a related question, but he really wants to know when can I get the driver's license?
In the United States. Yep. So that's a good question. In the United States, we have a federal system, and one of the things that the states decide is at what age are you allowed to drive. But the maximum age in every state that's possible is 18. So by the time you're 18, you'll be able to drive as long as you have a license in any state in the United States. But every state is different. So in some states you might be able to drive at 17, some states 16, some states only 18.
But can I get an American license?
Do you know about Florida?
No.
Can I get an American license if I don't have a Russian one?
Yes, but you will have to take like the driving test in the United States, and then you'll get your license.
and each state is different on the way that they do driver's education, what the rules are. In fact, some the driving laws are different in every state as well, to an extent.
To a certain degree.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
right
generally you
side,
should
left
stay on the
side.
right side, but that's the same.
Other questions?
Других лицензий, кроме водительской, не нужно для жизни в Америке.
Hopefully your campus will be so beautiful you won't need to go anywhere.
Hopefully.
Hopefully there'll be some place where you can take the bus or the train or the plane to go visit someplace. And you don't have to get registered when you're in the United States.
No.
The way people that visit Russia have to get registered, or if you move in Russia, you get registered. There's none of that. The only registering you will do is with your university to make sure that you're going to your classes and that you're all set to be there. That's all you have to worry about for registering. So don't worry about going to the police station to get registered in America. You don't have to do that.
Can you work when you have a student visa? Is there a limit to working hours?
Yeah, I believe it's 20 hours, You can probably check that with the school, and it's the same for U.S. students who are in university, because the idea is your focus of your time should be studying and not working. Now, if the focus of your time is going to be working and not studying, you shouldn't be going on a student visa. That's a different kind of visa for you. And there are people also who go to work in the United States and then they study part-time. That's also allowed if you're on a work visa. Or if you're studying, the focus of your life should be your studies. You're allowed to go to the movies once in a while. You're occasionally allowed to call your family. In fact, probably like every day if you call your mom. But you should be focusing on your studies, and you can work part of the time to help you pay for the studies and also to have more experience. Like some people will work in a lab. If they're doing research on biology, they might work in a biology lab. Or if they're interested in baseball, they might work with a baseball team or something like that. So you can find a job that might be related to your interests.
As you say, the registration is not necessary. It's enough, just only visa, yes? Okay.
No registration in that sense.
And you can also, you may have read some places that you can only enter some locations. That's not the case for student visas or tourism. You can enter anywhere in the United States at any port of entry. So Canada, Mexico, wherever you want.
Great.
Кататься на лыжах в Канаду можно?
С канадской визой?
Нет, с американской.
С американской визой в Канаду, я думаю, что вам недостаточно.
We're not like the EU yet.
Окей, друзья, я думаю, что мы с вами поблагодарим наших гостей.
Good luck. Make sure you guys study hard, work on your English. If you're not sure what school you're going to yet, do your research. Pick a school that's going to be right for you. Like, многие люди там думают, что только самое важное, если это университет знаменитый или там в хорошем городе, думайте про то, что вам важно, как человек. Вам важно, чтобы университет был в большом городе, или вам интересно, чтобы был в маленьком городе, где можно легче познакомиться с людьми, передвигаться. Вам интересно, чтобы там было много зелени, чтобы было много деревьев, такое. Вам важно, чтобы там было тепло, и в птише было прохладно, чтобы вас вспоминало дом вашей, родину. Есть много вопросов, которые важно подумать перед тем, как вы приезжаете там жить в другую страну. Желаю вам всем удачи и успехи. Надеемся, что мы вас скоро увидим.
Спасибо.